Hello, good afternoon, or good morning if you're joining us from the Pacific Coast. Thank you all for joining me for episode 7 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I'm the founder, producer, and host for this series. I've been waiting for this moment. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I think that's all I can sing because of copyright. And I don't feel like paying for stuff. But it is the transition from shorts to sweaters here in New England. I have been waiting for this time of year. For folks who know me well, I love turtlenecks. I've been waiting to bust this out for a minute. This is my favorite turtleneck. I've had this one now like 8 or 9 years. I'm like, yay. Um, I think it's too soon though for Christmas decorations, even though I've seen some at all these other places and things like that. And I started hearing Mariah Carey. I'm like, no, it's November 16th. I'm like, can we like do I think I said this one season before, but can we do like turkey carols first before we get to Christmas? So, and then also I have to apologize. It is 2:13 p.m. Eastern time. As always, I meet with our guests a couple of minutes beforehand. With my big ass mouth, I talk a lot, I bind, and I'm like, oh, it's late. It's time to get started. So my apologies for being late again. It's becoming a tradition. So yeah, let's go ahead and get today's conversation started. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted almost 70 authors representing 10 plus genres from 5 countries and now 19 states. Our platform includes the live stream interviews, the audio podcasts, book clubs, and curriculum development assistance. Find us online at blackwritersread.com. Today, we welcome Brianna Wheeler, who is joining us from Portland, Oregon. Brianna Wheeler covers cannabis, culture, food, film, parenting, and local politics for print and web. She served as host, writer, and producer of the Willamette Week News podcast and is a frequent contributor to Portland City Cast. Her creative nonfiction work has appeared in the, I hope, my apologies if I mispronounced this, Nasiona, Midnight, and Indigo, and has been featured in Medium's Human Parts newsletter. Her first book, Altogether Different, a memoir about identity, inheritance, and the raid that started the Civil War, was published by Korza Books in 2023, and we'll be talking about that book today. If you could choose between being Black and white, what would you do? As a child, Brianna Wheeler, the mixed-race descendant of Dangerfield newbie, first of John Brown's raiders to die at Harper's Ferry, in their bid to end slavery, unconsciously chose whiteness, unaware that she had the choice at all. As an adult, following the deaths of her mother and grandmother, Brianna struggled with her own identity, convinced that her lasting legacy would be the rejection of her own Blackness. Y'all, that is so heavy. I just have to call that out. Then in 2020, a racial reckoning rekindled her connection to both her heritage and her grandmother's lifelong work of preserving the stories of Dangerfield and the rest of her ancestors, leading Brianna to confront both long-held family dynamics and her own place in history from a new perspective. A unique blend of memoir, creative nonfiction, and illustration, altogether different, and untangles the complex connection between the stories we tell ourselves and the history is preserved for us. To learn more about Brianna, visit her website at briannawheeler.com. That is BriannaWheeler.com. And throughout our conversation and her reading, I will be sharing her links. For those of you who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format. Brianna will read an excerpt from Altogether Different. We will then chat. If time remains at the end of the conversation, we'll open it up to Q&A for those who are joining us. We have viewers joining us typically from Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and either post them to our guests following our conversation or insert them during an appropriate time within our chat. I'd now like to welcome Brianna to the virtual stage. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. And one of the things I found out off air, we're fellow Libras. So it's so wonderful to have you on.
Libra gang, we roll deep, we roll strong.
Yes. I love it.
We will find each other and love on each other.
Yes, we will. So the stage is yours. Have fun reading.
Thank you very much. Chapter 6, Dangerfield. I've heard his name over and over for most of my life. He was a hero to my grandma and an idol to our family. In her eyes, she thought we should all aspire to be as brave, as brilliant, as resilient, and as devoted as the immortal Dangerfield, the first of John Brown's raiders to die during the raid on Harper's Ferry. Growing up, none of my Black friends knew Dangerfield. His name never came up in any of my American history classes. Even in my community college African American history class, his name was never mentioned. If, and that's a big if, you learned about the raid on Harper's Ferry in school or in an African American history community college class worth 3 credits, John Brown was undoubtedly the main element of the lesson. John Brown? John Brown. As in, glory, glory, hallelujah, his soul goes marching on. That John Brown, the one whose body lies a mouldering in his grave. The raid on Harper's Ferry, as my grandmother tells it, is the battle that started the Civil War, the war that ended slavery, and Dangerfield was the shining hero. The event took place in 1859 at the United States Federal Armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and occurred between a motley army of abolitionists and a chaotic assemblage of pro-slavery militia and U.S. military forces over the course of 2 days. The raiders had overtaken the armory with plans to abscond with weapons, arm the enslaved, and light the fuse of an American insurrection. The raiders, including Dangerfield, were led by Brown. Henry and Elsie Newby had settled in the northwestern corner of Culpeper, an area known as Upper Cutter Country. Their self-sufficient farm, not productive enough to be called a plantation, was, just as others in the sparsely populated neighborhoods of the Upper Cutter Country, dependent on enslaved labor. Dangerfield was the first of Henry and Elsie's 11 children, and since his mother was technically still the property of John Fox as of his birth, Dangerfield and all of his siblings were born the property of John Fox as well. I try to consider the dynamics between Elsie's ostensibly affable owner and her common law husband. My grandmother's stories were trimmed with familial unity that led a listener to believe that the family lived in relative peace. Yet Dangerfield and his siblings grew up laboring either on their own farm or as leased help on neighboring plantations. The Newby land had about 150 improved acres, workhorses, milk cows, cattle, swine, 14 sheep that presumably Henry and Elsie's children sheared for wool. They grew Indian corn and wheat, and between all of that, the children were rented out to work on farms in other counties. The neighboring slave-managed lands must have been replete with families that looked like the Newbys. They must have built communities to protect these clandestine partnerships that produced children with loose ringlets, beige skin, broad noses, and pillowy lips, who looked like both and neither parent, whose presence was at once highly criminal and decidedly valuable. Those neighborhoods were strewn throughout the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountain, in a region particularly fond of and influenced by camp meetings, or what we might call church service. Protestants had imported an evangelical branch of Christianity from Britain that had a considerable presence in the Upper Cutter freeholds of Culpeper. Those camp churches have long since surrendered themselves to the elements. Their records are lost to time. But it's not preposterous to consider that Henry, or perhaps the entire family, was devout. Perhaps they found a compassionate community in those camp meetings. Perhaps they found safety. In those small religious communities, John Brown was already known, and his cause was already embraced. He was imbued with the divine. He was prayed for. To his detractors, he was a religious fundamentalist. To his followers, he was animated by a God-given purpose, a new Moses, and he would lead these people to a promised land. As an adult, I'm apathetic about religion, but I was raised under my grandmother's evangelical wings, and those lessons linger for a lifetime, for better or for worse. I've seen the power of my prayers, but in conversation, I'll call it meditation and manifesting. I felt the Holy Spirit swell in my chest when the entire karaoke bar erupts into chorus together. But I've called it drunken camaraderie. I understand that a force greater than any one person connects us all. I also understand that God is an invention of man. Today, when faced with a question of morality or ethics, I sometimes ask myself, what would Joshua do? I don't belong to any church, and I probably never will. But in this way, I relate to the newbies and to John Brown. Religion is an abstract touchstone, but it's a touchstone nonetheless. Between 1826 and 1844, Elsie Newby gave birth to 10 more children, most of them in Culpeper. Elsie remained a part of the Fox estate, but she was known in this small foothill community as Henry's wife. Though census records show Henry Newby in possession of up to 21 slaves, in 1860, the Newby family all but disappeared from Virginia. In the preceding decade, a few Newbys of working age that had built families in the area, including Dangerfield, lingered in Culpeper as free Black people, though now with manumission papers from the state of Ohio. In adulthood, Dangerfield was statuesque, tall and lanky, with thick curls that appeared to lay flat, but likely only after a great deal of persuasion. His shoulders were broad and his posture rigid. His nose was both wide enough to speak to an African heritage and narrow enough to pass for something altogether different, which by all accounts he was, which by all accounts I am as well. Dangerfield mastered a number of trades. He was a skilled blacksmith, a skilled craftsman throughout Ohio and Virginia, and he had a reputation as a canny and vigorous young worker. He fell in love with a house servant named Harriet, but the enslaved were not allowed to marry. So in all likelihood, Dangerfield and Harriet jumped the broom, a tradition that sidestepped the rules of the white owner class. Dangerfield and Harriet would unite and start a family in the same way many other enslaved Virginians did, in the margins of their persecution, during the unaccounted for hours in the day, when masters turned their backs, or the long shadows of a heavy sun obscured their silhouettes in embrace. In the societies that developed in those margins, I really hope the two of them were able to celebrate. That Harriet put flowers in her hair and wore a delicate white dress, and Dangerfield contradicted his stiff, single, iconic portrait with an impassioned and poetic pronouncement of vows. On their wedding night, I hope they slept together, rather than Harriet returning to the home of a man who claimed ownership over her. His family slowly, over a number of years, migrated across the Ohio River to their freedom, shepherded by their father, Henry. But Dangerfield received his manumission papers after establishing residency with his father in Bridgeport at the outset of their migration. Then, Dangerfield traveled back and forth between Bridgeport, Ohio, and Culpeper with the intention of raising enough capital to buy the freedom of his wife and family. Buying the freedom of your family was not an uncommon practice, as more and more enslaved peoples were freed across the Ohio River. Dangerfield and Harriet's love letters back and forth immortalize an unimaginable struggle. These letters are why my grandmother, as well as historians studying John Brown, cling so fiercely to the idea that Dangerfield followed Brown into Harper's Ferry to liberate his family. Brentville, April 11th, 1859. Dear husband, I must now write you apology for not writing you before this. I know you will excuse me when I tell you Miss Jennings has been very sick. She has a baby girl and has greatly suffered. Her breast is raised. She had it lanced, and I had to stay with her day and night, so you know I had no time to write. She is better now, and I am aware that the greatest importance is you. I have no news to write, only that the children are well. I want very much to see you. I want very much the promised time of your coming. Oh, dear Dangerfield, come this fall, without fail, money or no money. I just want to see you. That is my one bright hope I have before me. Nothing more at present, but I remain your affectionate wife, Harriet Newby. P.S. Write soon, if you please. Brentville, April 22nd, 1859. Dear husband, I received your letter today, and it gave me much pleasure to hear from you, but I was sorry to hear of your sickness. Be well when you receive this. I wrote you several weeks ago and directed my letter to Bridgeport, but I fear you did not receive it, as you said nothing about it in yours. You must give my love to your brother Gabriel and tell him I would like to see him too. Miss Virginia had a baby girl, and I had to nurse her day and night. Dear Dangerfield, you cannot imagine how much I want to see you. Come as soon as you can, for nothing would give me more pleasure than to see you. It is the greatest comfort I have, thinking of the promised time when you will be here. Oh, bless that hour when I shall see you once more. Our baby commenced to crawl today. It is very delicate. Nothing more at present, but I remain your affectionate wife, Harriet Newby. P.S. Write soon. My grandmother was resolute in her version of Dangerfield's story, that Dangerfield's alliance with John Brown was born from pursuit of capital in order to buy the freedom of his wife. To hear my grandmother tell it, a true, rare love was the driving force behind his actions. But it feels so one-dimensional to assert Dangerfield's motives as lovelorn alone. If Henry and Elsie raised their children with the same evangelical values that inspired John Brown to relentlessly pursue radical abolition, it's far more fair to assume that Dangerfield's motives were bigger than love and family. The bodies they occupied would always be of far more value than any one of them could conceivably raise. At a certain point, Dangerfield must have known that her owner would never relinquish Harriet to him, no matter the price. But rescuing Harriet on horseback, emboldened by an army of armed, free people, this could have been what Dangerfield came to see as the only realistic route. And maybe the revolutionary plan that John Brown constructed made allowances for grandiose rescues of enslaved families. Maybe that was a priority that escaped the written records. Dangerfield's bunkmates at Kennedy Farm may have described him as lovelorn. They say he shared Harriet's letters with the company and John Brown. But I think Dangerfield knew and was realistic about his odds. He knew what it meant to go to battle behind the instrument of God known as the Old Terrifier. And he also knew that he was Black. But also, maybe he knew that his name would be inscribed alongside John's in history. And maybe that was his motivation. Maybe his love transcended time and place, and his actions were larger and more complex than the pursuit of freedom for his family. Maybe his actions were for his ancestors and the people that would one day call him ancestor. Of the few strands of family history available to us, Dangerfield's is the thread my grandmother grasped with the most tenacity. She would really only gab about Henry and Elsie's chilling fairy tale romance when some manner of new love cast its light on the family, but she needed no prompting to launch into the sad saga of our most newsworthy ancestor, Dangerfield. It had taken her nearly a decade of research to find him, and what she has found reverberated for generations. Dangerfield and I share the same round, cartoonish eyes, the same slim upper lip. Our noses are wide, but not wide enough to be categorically Black. Our hair is a tangle of loose curls that are only indicative of our mixed heritage to those with intimate knowledge of curl patterns. When I first saw Dangerfield's picture in my grandmother's book, Migrants Against Slavery, while my grandmother slowly died to the closing credits of Gunsmoke beside me, in my hands, Dangerfield's thread looked like mine. We were always mixed. This family has always been interracial. I find purchase in Dangerfield's story, and I grasp at my Blackness, only to find it inextricably intertwined with whiteness. Thank you.
Yes. First, can I say, are there plans for an audiobook?
Audiobooks coming this year. No, audiobooks coming next year. What year is it?
Oh my gosh, because one, you have such an amazing speaking voice, but also two, just the rhythm and the cadence and like the letters and just like this is such an archival piece, and I feel like it needs to exist in as many different media as possible so that it's extremely accessible. So like, yeah. I just, oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah, I'm stoked to do an audiobook. I've been working on my podcasting voice.
Yeah! This is so awesome. And I'm glad you're going to be the one narrating.
Yeah, for sure.
I love
For sure.
it.
Every time I do like a live speaking event or live reading, one of the first questions that I'm asked is, sis, when's the audiobook coming out? Stop playing, sis.
Yes. Stop playing.
Stop playing. Stop playing with us. So yeah, that's definitely on deck for 2025.
I love it. I'm so excited. Okay, so let's get started. I'm very excited for our conversation today. So I
Me
would love
too.
to, yeah, I would love to start off with hearing about the origin story of Altogether Different. Why this title, which is why I'm glad you read the chapter that you did, which kind of alludes to it,
Mhm.
and why the story right now?
Well, my grandmother passed in 2017, 2018. And she left behind a mountain of genealogical research. This was her, after she retired, this was her passion. So several decades she spent aggregating all of this information. Before her passing, in that year, I would go down, I live in Portland, they're in Los Angeles. So I would go down to Los Angeles periodically and just help organize, help support, do all of the things. And on one of these visits, I'm sitting next to my grandmother, and she hands me a book titled Migrants Against Slavery, Virginians and the Nation. And in this book, the central thesis is that the division that enslavement caused in Virginia, which is like the OG slave state, was a microcosm of what was happening across the country and was shined a light on the general I guess vibe that people were feeling about enslavement at that time, which was not, no, people were like, no, 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 not in my backyard. I would rather not do this. But the narrative of that time is that, oh no, we're doing it. We're doing it hard. We're gonna push it and we're gonna make it happen. Anyway, grandmother is accumulating all of this research. It's all accumulated. We're sitting on the couch. I'm reading this book that she's just handed to me. And I see a picture of Dangerfield Newby. I've been hearing stories about Dangerfield Newby my whole life. There's only one picture of him, one known picture of him, and it's in this book. And I'm faced with this picture. I have never seen an ancestor, much less one that looks like me, because that is not a privilege that is afforded to Black children or to mixed children. It's a rare privilege. So to see an ancestor and see him look like me, I was gagged and gooped and floored. And I wondered if my grandmother was showing me this because I was a writer. I was wondering if she was showing this because she wanted me to like pick up the mantle. She would never straightforwardly ask me, hey, you want to just like pick this up after I die? Because she was very much making those arrangements. She would never ask me that straight up, but it felt like she was. And she told me to keep the book. I brought the book home to Portland and I'm reading it. And there's more in the book. She's got little handwritten notes stashed into the underneath the cover, and she's handwritten quilt codes that she had found. All of these things, everything feels like a message to me. So when she passed at her wake, I just took it. I took all of that research, and it was 3 binders, messy, overstuffed binders. I took the binders and I took them home, and they sat in my kitchen for a good year until 2020. And in 2020, after George Floyd's murder, Portland really erupted in a very horrific way. So we had in my neighborhood, so my neighborhood is historically a Black neighborhood, and it is a historically Black neighborhood because Black people were not allowed to live in Oregon. It was written into the Constitution that Black people could not own property in Portland. And it wasn't until the shipyards opened in the early 1900s that they would allow Black people to come to work on those shipyards. This is just outside of Portland, in a part of the place called, in a part of the city called Albina. There was a terrible, terrible flood. The neighborhood, this low-income neighborhood full of blue-collar workers, flooded. Many people lost their lives. And they were all herded up into the neighborhood that I live in now, which was then redlined all through, until the 2000s, it seems like. And that's why it's the Black neighborhood. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I was like, a Black neighborhood? Are you talking about a city? Anyway, so 2020 happens, and the scene outside of my home was horror. It was Terrifier, because I live 2 blocks away from a police station, and I live, a quarter of a mile away from the police clubhouse. So the protests that happen in my neighborhood every night were violent. Things were on fire a lot. Glass was being broken constantly. And tear gas would fill the air in a way that you couldn't be outside. On one night, I went outside to what is going on? Everything stinks. And I broke out in hives because there was so much tear gas in the air because of the protests. All of this is happening, and I'm feeling helpless, just terribly, terribly helpless. The work that I'm doing is so cultural. It just and light and frothy and frilly, and it just doesn't seem like I have any power in this situation at all. I turn around and I see my grandmother's big ass stack of research, and I'm like, this is the time. This is when we do this. The inspiration for this book, I want to say that I want to say that I grabbed my grandmother's research and I came home and I just whipped that shit out. That is not the truth. It sat and it moldered for a good year until my community, what was happening in my community inspired me. And the way that it happened, I mean, serendipitous, because the parallels that occur in my book and what was happening, it is like my true hope that somebody 100 years from now will read my book and again be able to see and identify these cultural patterns that happen over and over again. The societal kind of amnesia that we have. This type of work, ideally, in my truest hope, is the cure for that. Did that answer your question?
Wow. Okay. I need to. You just gave a history lesson. You just gave an MFA craft session. You just. Oh. Woo! And we still got a lot of questions to go, y'all. Woo! Yes, that's right. I totally forgot about the protests in Portland, and I did not realize you lived dead smack in that. Ooh.
Yeah, it was gnarly. So there's already a militarized police presence. That's terrifying. And then there are all of these unmarked vans. And I've talked about this publicly before. This is not clandestine information, but it will still be argued. And I would anticipate it to be argued. But yes, people were being disappeared into vans in my neighborhood. That was terrifying. But that's what was happening in Portland. All of the city hall, the Justice Center buildings were boarded up, fenced off, burnt out. It was Armageddon. And that was happening. And meanwhile, it's still Portland, which is an objectively beautiful place. We've got these rivers ribboning through the city. The foliage is outrageous. The blossoms are blooming. I mean, this is an objectively beautiful place where these objectively terrifying things are happening every day. Yeah. Dealing with that dichotomy was the process of dealing with that dichotomy was writing the book.
How do I transition to the next question?
Oh.
I'm just how? Whoo, I'm how do you write in that? Damn.
Yeah, well, luckily, luckily, that was the wrong choice of words. What was also happening at the time was the pandemic. So I'm very much your friend that came out of the pandemic I wrote a book. What did you do? Yeah. What's your excuse? I very much had that energy. Just an asshole.
Holy shit! Whereas everybody else is I did a sourdough starter kit, and
yeah,
you're
hey, make banana bread. I'm cool. Congratulations. I'm proud of you.
You wrote a book about a revolution while living in the middle of a revolution. What the fuck?
What the fuck? Who am I? Who do I think I am? Who is she?
Next question. Oh my God. This conversation is going to be so good. We're only in question 2, y'all. Altogether Different is deeply personal and very self-reflective, especially being your debut book. Can you talk about your writing process and how you determine a specific narrative for this book? So before, Brianna, you answer, I want to kind of offer this for folks who are watching and who will listen to the audio podcast. So Brianna is a very well-established journalist, has worked in marketing and all these things. And for folks who have been following me for a long time, you know that I've had a lot of past or current journalists on, and you know the whole, and I think it's very similarly to like historians and journalists, where it's like how much of a mask you wear to write the thing, how much of yourself can you really uncover and unravel because you're already a public figure. And for folks who have not read the book yet, and I hope y'all do really soon, this book in the first 5 pages, I'm like, damn, like it's so deeply personal. And I said this to Brianna offline. I said, this reads very much like a journal. Like this is very privileged information, and it opens with like, damn. And like just how self-reflective, I don't want to give the book away, but like you are is just intense. And so I want to know, given how deeply personal and very self-reflective you are in the book, can you talk about the writing process and how you determine the specific narrative and framing of the book?
Sure. The writing process for this book is not that different than the writing process that I employ professionally, and it's because I came into my path to professional writing is so meandering and weird and non-traditional. So any classes that I took, any education that I procured, like in regards to my writing, I accrued in adulthood. I went to school for metalsmithing and visual art. And one of my kind of like a little passion, fun hobby that I had was making zines. And so I did that all through junior high school. And then when I moved to Portland, one of the first things I did, make a zine. Those zines and the way, I guess, like, you know, like you coming up in the 90s, there was very much like a template for the kind of zines that were happening at that time. And they were highly personal. They were journals, they were diaries. So that's the school of writing that I come from, quote unquote, school of writing that I come from. It's journals. It's all journal type stuff. Now, in my personal life, I keep a journal. Like I have so many freaking journals. It is unhinged how many journals I have. It's like 20 years worth of journal. I clear them shits out like every couple decades because it's just unreasonable how much journaling I have. So even in that style of like, I don't have the acumen to produce like a journalistic piece that's super dry and super concise. I cannot put emotion. I can't not put my emotion into it. I can't not write like that. The only reason that I'm writing, professionally or personally, the only reason I'm writing is to process the information for myself so that I can understand it. So that's always the POV that I'm using. So the POV that I'm using professionally or personally is I'm writing a diary. I'm writing a journal entry. That's also where like the illustrative elements of the book come from. Like those are illustrations from my journal because I was journaling the whole time that my mother was dying. I was journaling the whole time my grandmother was dying. I was journaling the whole time that 2020 protests were happening. I was journaling through George Floyd's murder. I was journaling through the pandemic. So it's all the style of writing. This art, my art, is a diary, right? Does that make sense? Like that's the process. Yeah. So I just don't have the like, I'll sit at a table with fellow writers and they'll be talking about their processes and that shit sounds like a different language to me. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. Absolutely could not be me. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
It does. And it's really refreshing. And one, memoir is my favorite genre, and I'm working on my first memoir now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a meeting with my book doula the other day, and we were talking about, because I've written a couple of chapters, but it's now taken this whole, Lisa Pegram is leading me on this whole other journey, and it's becoming this whole thing about, like, it's even more deeply personal than what I thought. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm not necessarily, some people say I'm an open book, but I don't think I am. There's still a lot of things I keep closed. But at the same time, I feel like I'm somebody who explores the self through writing. And I actually, as I've always been an artist, but I started off as a musician and in theater. I don't have a degree in writing, but ironically, I teach writing. And so, And so, right, malpractice. I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. And so I like honestly that I did not do the MFA education. Well, I have an MFA, but in theater, but like an MFA in writing and all these things, because I feel like those rules box you in a very particular way. And it's like, and if you can't come out of that box, then are you really going to be a writer? But then if you don't want to be in, also, if you don't want to be in that box, can you be a writer? And for me, because I love fucking with genre all the time, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not widely published, but I feel like it is the most freeing I can exist in myself when I am able to not follow rules, and also really paying homage to my heart and to my ancestry, and also to when you think about, and I hope I'm not all over the place, when you think about like the African diaspora, the whole notion of oral storytelling and all of these different ways of telling stories. And so whenever, well, yes, I take advantage of folks who are formally trained in writing, and I've had them on, but it's like folks who found their way to writing in a different way. I like to like even tune in even more, because this is the type of writing that I want to do, where I'm not boxed because of genre and, you know, all these things. And so I want to thank you for writing, and also too for writing this memoir and kind of offering me indirectly a blueprint to how to approach my own work.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah.
I that's writing this as like the impetus was like, God, I just want to, you know what's wild? I was writing this and I'm pouring my heart out, and I'm like, this is going to touch every single mixed race person that's ever lived. And the thing that is getting people together more than anything else is there's several themes, or there's a few themes in the book that are kind of all braided together. And one of them is a trust battle that happens between my family and I after my grandmother's passing. That is what resonates with people the most. That is what people come up to me after readings. I mean, after the audiobook thing, oh, you got to make an audiobook. They're also like, oh, I was also involved in a terrible trust battle with my family. I had no idea that this was like a universal experience, but hey. So if people are, it is like, I gagged and thrilled that this would inspire someone to explore their own story and share it. Not because they are like, oh, wow, this story was so amazing, but because they're like, oh, Brianna she didn't go to school for this. She's like, we're all writers. We all know how to write. You can tell a story. You can write a story. You can share a story. You can get input on a story. You can build a story. We are all writers, and we all have stories to tell. So if that like helps somebody, like no master's degree here. Nope. Just vibes.
Yes. Oh yes. And my vibes is hundreds of $1,000s in debt up to a doctoral degree, which I'm like,
I want that, but I'm poor and scared. So,
especially now, given the apocalypse we're about to enter, but that's a whole other conversation.
I know, and I'm like, I wrote about it. Look at the patterns. Okay.
Oh, sweet Jesus. See,
literally,
you forecasted this shit, but also, as you said, I forgot the exact word that you use, but it's like in the book, but it's like we keep returning, like the cyclicalness, and it's because we're not learning about our past. So
I'm amnesia
like,
over here.
Yes, there's the word. There we go.
Yeah, it's wild.
And I love that you say amnesia, because it feels purposeful. It feels like people are purposefully pretending like shit didn't happen.
Right. And for why? That benefits no one. We don't move forward. We just spin in circles, as evidenced by the state of the world.
We're not even spinning in circles. Next, I'll go on to the next question. The image I get when I think about the now. So you know the game that kids play when they have like the baseball bat and they like put their head on it and they spin around it and then they have to what? That's the shit that we're doing right now as a society. I'm like, what
Oh
the
my
fuck?
gosh. Just falling, just dizzy, just knocking into it, just headbutting.
Just headbutting. Like, I can't. I'm just like, oh my God. Like, but that's a whole, like, I keep saying I want to start the podcast where I talk with Black authors about politics and society. I will eventually do that at some point. We are only on question 3, y'all. Yes, I'm so enjoying this. Being part memoir, part creative nonfiction, part history, what were some of your source materials for the book, especially given when you started writing the book after your grandmother's passing? How much did you have to tap into memory, and how much did you had to create to gift readers this story?
Props to Grandma, because she literally wrote half this book. All her work, she had put together the perfect package for me. I mean, she could not have handed me a more like beautifully wrapped package to make a book with. It was messy as fuck, but in the organization is when the book comes together. That the story is already there. It just needed to be jigsaw puzzled back together in a way that when another I don't know, style to my writing is that I want to write things that I want to read. I don't think that my tastes are, wild or odd. But I'm going through this, like, this was stuff that did not interest me when I was a kid. How can I make this interesting to everybody now? But either way, Grandma did the bulk of this research. There is an author, Eugene Meyer, and here's another thing. This kind of like Civil War history research, scholastic publishing, academic, it's all white dudes for the most part. And you have like a stray, but like the events that I've done and even the people that attend the events, it's an overwhelmingly white scene. So I was able to use a lot of content from these different authors. Eugene Meyer was a huge influence. He wrote about Dangerfield. He wrote about the 5 Black raiders in John Brown's party. So his book was an incredible resource for me. And then there were some older books that my grandmother had, like an illustrated picture book about John Brown that would be in an elementary school classroom. That ended up being a tremendous resource for me. And then, like I said, I'm a chaotic journaler. So again, like the book, before I sat down intending to write a book, the book existed. Between my grandmother's work, all it was putting all that stuff together, cleaning it up, giving it to an editor. Oh. Really. I mean, I'm simplifying it tremendously, but essentially that's pretty much what it was.
Nice.
Yeah. But there's like, I think on my website somewhere, there's like the reading list for this. So Nicole Hannah-Jones, the
1619 Project?
19 Project was huge.
Nice.
And there's like other, like, I use James Baldwin also. There are different authors that are reflecting a specific experience. And I'm like, oh, that's super relevant. I'm going to include that. Oh, that's super relevant. I'll include that too. But essentially, like, journals, grandma's work, and then just a small handful of reference books.
Nice. Altogether different centers and positions your Blackness in a very profoundly beautiful way. Given that you've been writing, especially other genres like marketing and journalism, prior to writing your memoir, why was it important to you to explore this part of your identity in this book? How do you see yourself as a writer and cultural contributor evolving after this project? Or how has your writing evolved since finishing Altogether Different?
Well, I'll tell you, it is like, after the book is completed, the hardest thing is to turn around and be like, okay, back to work at the writing ads for this yada yada, or reviewing a hemp stick for da 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 over here. That was difficult. How it has changed me is it makes, okay. The biggest change is that when I started presenting the book live, that shit felt so natural to stand in front of a crowd and read, or to just stand in front of a crowd and storytell about the process. That felt like the most natural thing in the world. I'd be so nervous beforehand, but once I get up there, this is what I was meant to do with my life. It was very much that emotion. Refresh what were the bullet points of this question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
see, I have a tendency to do this, to ask really long-winded questions. The book centers and positions your Blackness in a very profoundly beautiful way. Given that you've been writing, especially in other genres like marketing and journalism, prior to writing your memoir, why was it important to you to explore this part of your identity in this book? Because y'all, it like, and just how, like, I have a question later about this because I have the book right here, but it's like, ooh, because even I was like, the little Brianna, I was like, you were critical. Look, I was like, damn, okay.
Bitches are born.
Yes. So why was it important to you to explore this part of your identity in this book? And then how do you see yourself as a writer and cultural contributor evolving after this project? Or how has your writing evolved since finishing altogether different?
So the centering of this idea of Blackness was based in the so first of all, I look the way I look. I'm very light skinned. I bleached my hair blonde. I live in the whitest city ever. People look at me and they're like, "Oh, she's a little bit different." You have to know what mixed people can look like to look at me and say, "Oh, she's mixed." Black people don't look at me and say, "There goes a white girl." Well, sometimes in Oregon, because there are not many mixed people here. There's not like a range. They're like, "You don't look like Halle Berry. You don't look like Barack Obama. You must be white." So losing my mother. So I would have confrontations in Portland living here where people would, or fuck that, rewind. I have had confrontations my entire life where people will say to me, "You're not black. Oh, you're not that black. Oh, you're black, but you look so white. Lucky for you." Like, just fucking out of pocket shit. My whole friends, people that I call my friends, have said shit like this to me. Just from places of ignorance, not from places of malice. And my mother lived in the academic world. She's a teacher, she's an artist. She was always surrounded by white academics too. So we would connect so fiercely about this. And we would just have these beautiful come to Jesus moments about it and just really hash it out because she got where I was coming from. So when she died and I didn't have anybody to talk about that shit to anymore, I was like, I'm not black anymore. I don't think I'm black anymore. What happened? And then my grandmother's very light skinned too. And so that was like a 1-2 punch of losing her. My grandmother did not exist in the same kind of academic realm that my mom did. So I couldn't have those conversations with my grandma. My grandma was just there to kind of reinforce that yes, I am part of this family. Yes, I exist here. Yes, I belong here. But there was no like, we're connecting on this very specific feeling, this tract, this fucking through line in our lives. We did not have that connection. So between losing both of them, I just felt like I lost this huge part of my identity. And how do you get that back? Do you even get that back? I don't know if you ever get that back. So this is my like desperate trying to like, no, I still have this connection. Please, I want it. I mean, the book is the battle of me losing, getting. Do I deserve it? Do I want it? Do I need it? Do I have it? Did I always have it the whole time? Does it even fucking matter? It's that. So there's no resolution there. And I don't know if, as looking the way I look, living the way that I live, I don't know if resolution is a word that gets to live in this vocabulary in regards to this. That's fine. That's totally fine. I can just be this individual and I don't have to be, I can just be this individual, you know? Yeah. And so I was writing about, I'm the only Black writer on staff, or I'm not on staff, only freelance. I'm the only Black writer in the main writing gig that I have, the newspaper. Yeah, other freelancers come and go, but consistently writing, the only Black writer. And I'm writing the cannabis column in a state that is notoriously bigoted. So even before the book, I was like, okay, so we're writing this cannabis column, and yes, it's going to be fun. It's going to be light. And it's going to be frothy, but we are also talking about real shit up in this bitch. We're going to talk about pushing Black people. We're going to talk about racial justice. We're going to talk about social justice. We're going to talk about health injustice. We're going to talk about all that stuff. It's all going to come back to cannabis, but I'm never going to shy away from the fact that I'm Black. Even if you see it, hey, I'm white too. I can be both of those things. Both of those things can be true. And I'm going to use it and stand on those platforms when I can. And no, not stand on that platform when I can. Push that platform over to someone when I can. That's been the biggest part of working for that newspaper, is being able to like, oh shit, you have a story. Come on, tell the story, babe. I've got the platform, but you take it by all means. So the justice thread, I guess it got thicker and heavier and denser throughout the course of the writing, but it was always there. It was always there. And then centering my Blackness, it's still, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do we, the definitions change. Who can and who can't and people used to tell my mom that she talked white all the time. Like, what the fuck does that? It's so complex. It's so convoluted. But if I can center this experience of Blackness, and that resonates with someone else who also doesn't feel like, well, I emerged into this world from a Black vagina. How am I not fucking Black? Right? I'm not trying to have that argument with people.
Yes.
So if that connects, if that like lights up someone else's neurotransmitters, then fabulous.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled. So happy about it. Did that answer the question?
It did. And just FYI, I'm not like, you know how like people say they have Gator and all this stuff. There's a part of me, I'm like, I think I have like Black Dar. So like people who say they can pass and think that I'm like, because when I first saw your picture, I was like, oh my gosh, she is so Black. Okay. Hey, I was like, she is so Black. Okay. She may be melanin deprived, but.
Well, Oregon's not helping.
Yeah.
The sun does not shine here, sis. It is dark. Legit.
Yes.
Hashtag You should see, there's like, I've got a little, 4 or 5 different mixed friends here that are, half Black, half Latinx, or like we are all so pale.
Damn.
All of us just looking at each other, just yellow. Yeah. Thank you for seeing me.
That's hilarious. And I've always wondered, because it's like, because y'all do have some really beautiful, I haven't been out there, but I've seen pictures. Y'all have some beautiful ass landscapes. And I'm like, how does this shit grow when there's like no sun? Like,
yeah, it's wild. A lot of rain. Brief flashes of sun.
Yes. Yes, y'all. We told y'all this is going to be a trip today. I'm enjoying this trip. I'm enjoying it. I'm like, yes. So you talked a little bit about this in terms of some of the illustrations that are in the book. Altogether Different includes several illustrations, which I love, given that you are also a visual artist. Can you share with us what these illustrations are? You did a little bit earlier, and how they contribute to the overall narrative of the book.
Sure. Okay, my favorite book from childhood, and even today my son and I are reading it now, is a book called The Phantom Toll Booth. Oh. Is that familiar? I'm sure that people, it's popular 90s. Well, I don't think it was written in the 90s, but that's when I read it. So it's just a fantasy, little short fantasy chapter book. But it's the narrative is rich, complex, lots of stuff going on, and it's interspersed with like these illustrations that do not seem like they were professional. Like, they're not clean, they're not sharp, they're very much like a rough sketch of something. They look like they originated from a sketchbook. So that's been my favorite book for like most of my life. It's been one of my favorite books, and I guess that was buried deep in my brain. And when I was writing this, I was like, oh, I definitely an illustration here. There are certain feelings and certain moments that I felt like I couldn't describe without that visual element. There's an illustration of my grandmother's piano that I just could not, I don't have the words to tell you how important that piano was to me, how much I loved it, but I can draw it for you and you will know how much I love that piano when you see the picture that I drew of that piano. You know what I mean? Wow. Or I can try to explain to you how isolating and lonely and terrifying it was to be wrapped up in this estate battle that was ripping apart my family. And we were very close. We always were. And we were exploding from the center. And it was like, you're watching these relationships that you grew up with, that you fostered your entire life, evaporate, just fall the fuck away. And I can try really hard to describe that, but I can also draw what that felt to me. And to me, that drawing feels like it elucidates that emotion much more than my words could. Wow. And the zine thing, like, it's just always a part of the process. The journals, it's always. I was watching that Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight last night.
Yes.
Just drawing a picture of Mike Tyson's butt for like an hour in my journal. That was my big takeaway from the night. Journal, that's just a part of that's part of my art, is to be like a little sketchy little drawings in the margins. Why did I bring that up?
No, I love it. Oh my God, which I didn't see the fight last night. This is typically what happens. Like, I don't watch the cultural moment. I like end up on the tail end of it on social media, and that's what happened today. People were posting, I was like, why is there pictures of Mike Tyson's ass? Oh, okay.
Oh God, it was a glorious moment. But yeah, it's been memed to death already, I'm sure.
Yes, and it hasn't even been 24 hours yet.
Yeah, as soon as it happened, I grabbed my sketchbook. Oh, this is going on the history books right here. Yes. That butt looks great.
Oh, yes. Next question. Yes. Okay, and this is a serious question, so let me try to. Yeah. Serious question. With themes of identity, place, and home, memory, grief, and reconciliation, what did you learn about yourself while writing this book?
Oh my God. Well, I'm kind of a cunt. I learned that. Is that okay to say? Yeah, I'm kind of a dick. I'm kind of a bully. I'm kind of a jerk. And I will write about you. Like, I will write how I feel. Yeah. I guess the main thing that I learned about myself, that was big, was that, like, when I was excavating these emotions, because working with my editors, they were clocking me every time I tried to hold back. They're like, yeah, you're holding back. What did you really feel though? Yeah, you're not really describing how you really felt though. And it was in that excavation of like, why do you feel like that? Because you're kind of a cunt. That's why you feel like that. You're kind of an asshole. That's why you feel like that. So you got to realize that stuff about yourself. And the writing becomes truer. It becomes thicker, richer, because I'm not afraid to say it. I'm like, I felt comfortable saying the things that I said about my family because I first said the things that I said about myself. Yeah, the biggest thing I learned about myself is I'm kind of an asshole.
Damn.
Hey, you got to know so that you cannot do that, so you cannot be a jerk. So I'm digging apart these feelings, unraveling these feelings, and I'm seeing this common thread of like, well, you're kind of being a judgy dick. Well, maybe if you stepped back, maybe if instead of, going into the corner and crying, maybe if you stood up for yourself and said something, you would have had a different outcome. Maybe if you advocated for the things that, instead of just, these learned behaviors that are so that just put me into this place of being like, I don't want to be an asshole. I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm certainly not, it's not my MO to be a cunt. But the nature of the lifestyle, the life that it was made. I wasn't born like that. I was made. Mm-hmm. So I got to unmake all of that stuff now. It's a gift to learn those things about yourself, because now I cannot do those things, not be that way.
I love, damn, you called yourself a cunt. Like,
You just gotta
woo!
know. You have to know. Because if you are and you don't know, then I pray for you. Really.
Yes. And as I say, and my husband's in the other room. He'll probably appreciate this. I am very difficult to live with, so I get it. So, and I think this is what makes really good writing, and like, because we are very self-reflective and we understand who we are as
Mhm.
Libras, especially.
Oh my God. That Libra thing too. Oh my goodness. Because it has to be like, as soon as that balance is off, why? Why? What is happening? What is this energy? Is it me? Is it you? Is it, we have to find the balance again. If it's me that is sending this shit off into the stratosphere because it's off balance, well, then I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to get introspective and I'm going to deal with that. If it's you, I'm going to fucking tell you. I'm going to publish a book about it.
Yes. Oh, and this segues so nicely into this question, the next one. Prior to having our guests on Black Writers Read, we ask each of them why they write. Here's what you wrote. I write because it is my compulsion. Writing is the lens through which I view the world and often myself. In this way, writing feels very necessary for me and necessary to me. To me, being an author during this time in American history, and oh, we are in a time right now, means bearing a responsibility to future readers, creating the most detailed snapshot I can so that my work can relate to readers in perpetuity. It's important to share my work because it can inspire others to share theirs, to record their histories, and to really examine the history happening around us all the time. Future anthropologists, historians, and authors will all rely on writing what we do now. So before I pose this question, because I send questions ahead of time, which mine were very late today, I learned this after I sent the questions, which I think is really cool. There's a second edition of the book with a study guide,
Yeah.
which I think is so cool. So this is what leads into the next question. What life would you like for Altogether Different to take on? Who are your desired readers? And what would you like for them to learn from reading this book?
I have a dream for Altogether Different. I have more books in me. This is like my first child, I guess, in a way. And the life that I imagined for her when she was born was that she was going to be taught in schools. Well, we got into that right away, and she was taught at El Camino College in Southern California from that first edition. Oh, it's so cool. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great if I went and just did a straight up EGOT with this? What if what if it gets picked up I get to write a screenplay for the movie? What if it gets picked up and it becomes a mini series and I get to write parts of the mini series? What if it's made into a stage play and I'm able to contribute to the stage play in that way? Like, this work is timeless in that way. The themes are timeless in this way that it can exist in these different mediums in perpetuity. And I would love for that life to be a reality for the book. But I'm also happy just to see it in anyone's hands, to see anybody reading it and getting anything from it. So the dreams are very grandiose. The reality is, like, I would love for, when I wrote it, I'm writing it thinking like, oh, this is going to resonate with every single mixed person in the world. They're going to love this. And as I said, like, people are just like, nah, this trust stuff's really got me hooked in. So I didn't even realize the broader appeal of the book, because I thought it was like, oh, this is niche. This is fucking niche as hell. It is not. It's not niche at all. It's super universal. These themes are so universal, which did not occur to me until the book had been in hands. I got to have those conversations with people that had read the book. So to that end, who I wanted to read the book, initially, my ideal reader is always me. Like, I don't necessarily have, like, there's nobody in my life that I'm like, oh my God, read this, you're going to love. Like, I am my ideal reader. I'm a pretty voracious reader. So I know what I like.
Yes.
And I know that I like good stuff. Only the best. Anyway, my ideal reader is me. But I very much had to, like, just wipe that away and understand that even with this kind of, like, idea of an ideal reader, that if I do it right, it appeals to everybody. The themes are too universal to ignore. So I don't know. I guess the ideal reader now, the person that I want to read it now, is somebody who wants to ground themselves in the midst of what is happening to our country, to our culture right now, who wants to know that there is a way out of this, to know that there are fights that you can fight, that, yeah, it's ugly, but there is an other side to it, that we have been through these cycles, that your grandmother had it way fucking worse than you do, and her grandmother had it way fucking worse than her. So perspective also. Am I blowing out this mic? I'm so passionate.
Yes.
But so that's that kind of ideal reader feeling is it's more universal, you know.
Yes. And no, I'm not of mixed race, but I was like, I connected to this book, and I connect. So see,
look at God.
I'm like, I'm only 5% European ancestry, but I connected to this book.
That's what's up. That's what's up. See, but the themes of like loss, grief, love, the ideas of finding heritage, finding those threads and pulling back together. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really was like, oh, nobody's going to get this except mixed people. That is so ignorant of me to think, you know, because those, I'm telling, like, these feel now with objectivity, I can say, no, these are universal themes. Mm-hmm. This is not just a mixed thing, you know. It's very
yes. Altogether Different opens with the story of your younger self and the Peaches and Cream Barbie dolls, which I remember. I was a huge fan of Barbie. I remember the dress of this doll. I remember the dress.
Delicious peach.
Yes. And the layers. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'm going to start over. Altogether Different opens with the story of your younger self and the Peaches and Cream Barbie dolls for folks, and your desired wish for a particular version of the doll. As this memoir explores identity and somewhat coming of age through maternal ancestral lineage, what would you say to a younger Brianna about what life has for her?
Oh my God, I love this question. Okay. Obsessed with Barbies as a little femme Libra. Of course, you love Barbies. So when Peaches and Cream dropped, I had to have her. I didn't even know that there was a black version because they don't put the black version in the commercials in 1986, you know? Yeah. So when my grandmother had presented me with that version, it was kind of like, ugh, thanks, I guess. Then my white grandmother gives me the white Barbie that Christmas. I've got both of them. This is the beginning of the like, oh no, how does a person be mixed? Am I supposed to choose one of these? One of these is inherently more valuable. I know that I wanted one of them more. I didn't even know the other one existed. That's too much. That's too much thinking for a little, 7-year-old girl. What I would love to tell baby Brianna, and I would love to bring an item to show her in 2021, I believe, Mattel released a line of dolls, Barbie dolls, and they were extra. That was the name, the extra dolls. And one of them is very obviously mixed. She's got beautiful beige golden skin, and she's got a big blue crown of curly hair. Oh my God. She looks just like me. The picture of me on my book, there's a Barbie of her. Woo! I would love to show that Barbie to baby Brianna and be like, look, I know you really feel like you got to make this choice right now. And like your family loving you depends on whether you make this choice right. Wait it out. There is a Barbie coming into your life. I mean, you're going to be 40 when it happens, but there is a Barbie coming into your life that is going to rock your fucking world. She looks just like me. That's really like the way that shit healed my inner child. Because I think I was writing the book. Wow. And because I was writing about Barbies, the algorithm heard me writing about Barbies and started flooding my feed with Barbie ads. So when that Barbie was released, it shows up on my Instagram apropos of nothing. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mattel. How dare you? And thank you. What the fuck? You made a Barbie of me while I'm struggling with this fucking Barbie-induced identity crisis?
Wow.
Wild, right?
Do you have her?
I do. Do you want to see her? You have to give me 1 minute.
Yes!
Okay. Pause. I'll go
Yes,
grab her.
pause. Yes, which while we're waiting, I hope folks can see this. So her headshot and the marketing material for the book. This is what Brianna looks like on her official author headshot. So this is to prep y'all to see what the Barbie looks like. And thank y'all for continuing to stay with us as she goes to get this doll. But I'm so happy that this doll exists. So I'm like, yay, I'm ready. I'm so excited to see it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Yes. Oh, wow. Holy shit.
Who are these twins? Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
She's so mixed.
That's
She got
so.
thick ass legs too.
Yeah.
She got big ass.
I got a big ass.
Yes, tree trunks girl. And she got sneakers on, flat feet sneakers. This is me.
Oh, wow. That is so cool.
And this is the current favorite.
Oh,
Barbie.
wow. That is so cute. I'm so glad they make Barbies with the curly hair now, like the naturally curly hair. Thank you.
This one has baby hairs. They painted baby hairs on her forehead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I love Barbies again.
Oh.
And can I just say, that Barbie movie coming out at the same time as my book? What the
Oh,
fuck?
that's right. And then the documentary came out too recently.
Oh god. Us Barbie overload.
It's Barbie overload. But like you just gave me this question to think about for myself and also my own memoir, because I'm asking myself this question: how do I win myself back because of just things that I've like aspired to, including being married, and because I married much later in life. I married in my 40s, and like getting my doctorate and all these other things, and I'm like, fuck, who am I now? Like that's the question that I'm exploring. And I know some other writers who like finding their inner child after so much loss was very helpful. And I know that that was a time, like as a child, I didn't give a fuck. Like I am so fortunate, both my parents, which they have since passed on, they were like, because I grew up as an only child for a while, and like, my brother is 15 years younger, like they let me be that kid. They were like, oh, she sucked her thumb till 13. She'll stop whenever she's ready. She can, like she could do the thing. Like they were like, you can do the things that you want to do, self-explore, talk to yourself, all those other things. And I have severe anxiety and all kinds of other mental health issues. And I'm like, I felt so much freer when I was younger because I wasn't restricted. And I'm like, how do I return back? I want to go back to that person. And so some folks I know, like really good friend of mine who I'm gonna have on Black Writers Read in a couple of months. She's local. She has a Barbie doll that she recently lost her mom. She has a Barbie doll that she legit brings with her everywhere named Grace. And Grace is her friend. And she's like, yep. And I'm like, yep.
Emotional support Barbie.
Yeah, right.
Love that.
Yes. Like and I'm trying to find I need to find my way back because also too, I'm like, I have so much writing to do and all these other things, and I'm like, my mental capacity is holding me back. And I'm like, what is and especially in this world of fuck uppery. Like,
it's hard to focus on anything.
It's hard to
How? How am I supposed to focus on anything besides like my impending loss of autonomy?
And like I can only laugh to keep from crying. Like one of the
that.
things, like as And I hope I can look back at this moment in like 4 years and be like, we survived that shit. But like, not to get into politics, but like seeing that thing's cabinet like come together, I'm like, why does it look like puppeteerless Sesame Street Muppets? Like,
Right? Cartoon
I'm like,
villains.
right. Because my book dealer was like Dr. Claw and like the villains from cartoons in the 80s. I was like,
Yes. Yes. What is happening?
I'm like, what is happening? Like,
T. Yes. It's very hard to focus. Especially like this time around, it would be so much harder to write this book. It would be so much harder to connect with the inner child stuff. But one thing that helped me, I don't know if this would help you connect with the inner child at all, was like reconnecting with the media that I loved as a child. So like the stupid cartoons that I watched when I was a kid, which don't even really, they're kind of hard to find because 80s, 90s stuff, but like Sailor Moon, you know, will take me back to that place of whatever I'm trying to feel that I felt when I was a kid. Those things kind of like get me right back in there. What are the songs that I used to listen to? The songs that my parents used to listen to at that time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because actually yesterday, shout out friend of mine posted. It was great. He's a musician, college band director, and Chad Hughes, he posted on Facebook yesterday, and I totally forgot about this cartoon, The Ant and the Aardvark, and he was like dissecting, because he's a musician, dissecting the music, and I was like, I totally forgot about this guy. And I rewatched some episodes and I was like, damn, this was so good. It was like, and the Aardvark, which was like with the Pink Panther. And I'm like, yeah, I need to
Yes.
find these. Yeah.
Wow. Throwback.
Mad throwback.
Yeah. It's crazy the doors that shit can open up. Wild.
Yes. I have so many cartoons like Jam. I'm such a fan. Jam. Yes. It's truly outrageous. Okay, I hope I'm not fined for singing that. Copyright. Yes. Because I ain't got no money to pay for that.
Got student loans over here.
So many student loans. I'm like, why did I go into so much debt? But that's besides the point. I'm so loving this conversation. And I love, as the sun is setting over here in Connecticut, and like you are all the way in Oregon. What is next for you, and how can the Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
Well, okay, what's next for me? I've got a couple of courses in the pipeline. I'll be doing a course with Corporeal Reading, which is Lydia Yukotovich. I cannot say this woman's last name. Her a school of writing. So I'll be doing a memoir course for them next year. Audiobook is coming out next year. Work on the next book has already started. The next book is also a hybrid memoir. This hybrid memoir is of my mother's death, whereas this one was more focused on my grandmother's death. I have described Altogether Different as a braided memoir because it braids 3 strands, a memoir strand, it's kind of family history strand, and then like an actual legitimately historical academic type of strand. Or I'm sorry, and then the illustrations represent another strand. So my mother's passing, the book that I'm writing about that is a cookbook. So those are the strands that are being braided. It's the memoir of my mother's passing, the last year of her life. It's the recipes that we made during the last week of her life, because I really want this to be like so purposeful and useful. If you've ever had to deal with this, your loved one is shuffling off this mortal coil. You have a family. You still have to feed them. You still have to go and rush. You're going back and forth to a hospital. You're going back and forth to pharmacies. Recipes that you can make once and they last for 3 days. Recipes that you make once and that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's perfect. So it's kind of like when you need to get drunk. Here's a really great recipe for a boozy coffee. Things like that, you know? So it's like a practical guide for grief. It's also a legitimate cookbook. I was also a cook in my first life as a professional.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, before I started writing. So my first zines, a lot of them were cookbooks. So that's a thread that gets woven in. Also, it's kind of wild. I'm not sure how complex this thread will be, but an indictment of the diet industry, because my mother was overweight for most of her life. As she grew ill towards the end of her life, she lost a ton of weight, as you do when you have cancer. And she relied on these kind of naturopathic modalities to cure her. And a lot of these different organizations were very like, oh yeah, we can fix you, we can cure you. And they were making her do the most outrageous shit, these fucking long ass cleanses, being in isolation for weeks. You can't have it was just my point of view that, like, if you're gonna die next week, eat the fucking cake.
Yeah.
You're gonna die next, eat the fucking bacon. She was really trying to adhere so closely to these diets, these rules that other people were making for her. I really felt like she kind of wasted that last month of her life because she was so torn between wanting to survive and wanting to thrive and da 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 da. So there's this indictment is also a thread. Also, like, I feel like Black women are getting it worse than anybody is when it comes to this body shaming bullshit.
Yep.
Nobody could look at her and be like, well, I don't know, you're kind of like a regular size for your age and your weight and how much you've been through in your life.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the next book. And that will, of course, be informed by Altogether Different as well, because it's all the same narrative. It's all the same story. It's all this like kind of losing, gaining, grieving, learning, growing, sharing.
Yes.
So that's what's next. And you know what? Holler at your bookstores. Invite me to your town, and I'll do my little velvet voice and read a chapter. Ayo.
And I expect, Brianna, in the audiobook, you end it with "ow." Instead of "sin" or the end, be like "ow."
Ow. Noted. Requested. Noted.
Yes. And while you were reading, I finally understood your Instagram handle. I was like, "Bruh, what? Oh, Beyonce!" It took me a minute. I'm slow. Like, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah." And my husband's last name is Philippi, but his nickname is Flippy. I'm Brianna Wheeler. I'm not. I'm gonna change my name for no man.
Yeah!
But I'll hyphenate your nickname. No problem. I don't feel like saying that because I've said it to him. He knows.
And I purposely hyphenated for a political reason because many people, including a lot of men I dated in the past, never thought I was going to get married. And
as
so
you better
hyphenated
what you want.
Yes, and I hyphenated politically. So I'm like,
I love that.
So Brianna, it was so great having you on today. Thank you so much for just being you, girl.
This was a blast. This was so much fun. This is the most fun I've had. Love it.
Aww. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't tell the other podcast hosts.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for being on. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up, and then we can close out afterwards. So thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for episode 7 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. I'll be back on Saturday, November 23rd with our next guest. Support Black Writers Read by subscribing to my YouTube channel, where many of you are joining us from today, or the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Also, feel free to drop a review of Black Writers Read on one of these platforms. By supporting me as a subscriber or reviewer, you're growing the community, which can lead to longer-term sustainability for the platform. Visit blackwritersread.com to learn more about the podcast. And yes, so thank you for joining us for this lovely ride today. And more importantly, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. I will see you in a week.